much, Oksana, for the introduction. I would also like to thank Patrick, Oksana, and the team for allowing me to be part of this. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining this session. My name is Ehsan. I'm from the Faculty of Education, Universiti Kebangsaan Malaysia, that is National University of Malaysia. And today I'll be presenting some findings from a research project that investigated the effects of differentiated instruction in an English language classroom on learners' language attitude and critical thinking. It's a small-scale study that involved an English teacher and his intact classroom of 29 students, and the whole project spanned about 14 months. So the data were obtained from a developing country that was once under British rule, and being a Commonwealth country, the English learners, some of the English learners, they have different characteristics, and I will be sharing that in a bit. But the finding of the study has led me to an ongoing study with 200 students and 3 teachers, so the details of which I will provide at the end of the presentation. And I look forward to this sharing session, and it's not just about sharing the findings, but also I'm looking forward to potential collaboration between us along this line. And maybe it doesn't happen today, maybe it doesn't happen somewhere anytime soon, but I do hope that you will consider it someday in the future. Okay. Let me start by explaining differentiated instruction as I understand it and as to how it was applied in the study. Since there are a few frameworks from the literature, this study adhered to Tomlinson's definition of the term DI. And the term was actually coined by Tomlinson in 1999. And this is the definition. This is, the interpretation that has driven my own study and a lot of other studies out there. And Tomlinson defines DI as a set of instructional modifications at 3 levels: content, process, and product. And differentiation of content involves modifying the curriculum or material to be taught in class. And differentiating process would involve modifying learning activities to meet a specific criteria. It could be according to learning style, the cognitive style, and product differentiating product would involve modifying the type of learning output expected from students, either at the end of the lesson or as homework. However, it is a bit tricky to do content differentiation at government-funded school, or we call it national school, because teachers are required to finish and to cover a specific set of content and skills by the end of the academic year. And this is why in this particular study, I carried out teaching differentiation at the process and product level. But in addition to adhering to Tomlinson's definition of DI, I have also synthesized these principles from scholars in the field. If you look at this list, I designed a self-developed checklist for differentiated instruction before it was validated by educational experts. And this checklist was used by teachers to verify if the lessons during the intervention period were indeed differentiated. And from the list of principles, you can see that differentiation takes place when teachers focus on key ideas and skills by modifying either the content, the process, or product to match students' needs, and by helping all students experience success. And it is learner-centered or students oriented. It allows for flexible grouping, and teachers who differentiate are found to have varied individual work, pair work, group work, and whole class instruction to suit specific needs. And it also includes ongoing assessment in lessons to inform instruction. Now, the need to differentiate instruction was driven by these reasons. Firstly, because it was required, explicitly stated in the Malaysian Education Blueprint 2013-2025, and there were clear references to the necessity for teachers to differentiate instruction, and there is also an urgent need by the ministry for teachers to promote critical thinking in the classroom. Now, secondly, the composition in a typical Malaysian classroom at the national schools, either primary or secondary, it's mixed. We often have learners with different first languages. Most Chinese will either speak Mandarin or a home Chinese dialect, and most Indians speak Tamil, and the Malays speak Malay as a first language. And the non-Malays will also have to learn Bahasa Malaysia, or the Malay language, as the national language. And we have other ethnic groups in Sabah and Sarawak, and they have their own native languages. So English is learned by the majority of the population in the country as a third language. To some Malays, it's a second language, and to some other Malays, it could be a third language, because some of them, they do take Arabic, they do learn Arabic, so as a member of the Commonwealth countries, Malaysia has accorded status of English as a second language in the country. We call it a second language in the country, but by definition, what the Curriculum Development Center means is that it's the second most important language in the country. But in terms of use and proficiency among learners, among language users, it's not always the case. To some, it is a foreign language. They rarely use it, and they're not very proficient in it. So it is mandatory in Malaysia for English to be taught for 11 years, from age 7 to 17. However, the learning of foreign languages, if English is a foreign language to them, it will be influenced by the respective students' cultural and linguistic backgrounds, and also by their pre-existing levels of proficiency at the time of entering school. So usually primary school, because we have those who have never been exposed to English prior to coming to school, and we have some students who are very fluent in language. They use the language at home, usually by parents who are educated abroad, or by parents who are very accommodating, very accepting of English. And as students progress to the next academic year, now students' attainment is measured based on an overall performance across all subjects. And that's how they were streamed into several classes. So it's not uncommon. It's common to see that we have students in the first rank class who is not fluent in English, because he or she would be able to score in other subjects but English. And thirdly, due to the typical high number of students in each classroom in Malaysia at national schools, some urban schools may have around 40 to 45 students per class, and learning a second language poses additional challenge, additional difficulty, because they would have to compete for attention. And other subject areas, non-language subjects, they involve standardized curricula. So students' achievement may vary depending on their diligence in studying and their cognitive ability in comprehending the subject-specific concepts, but not English, because the same texts that are taught in class will most likely not appear in the exam. And this has causes much anxiety to learners with poor proficiency. And finally, this is what I would like to highlight. There has been a report of mixed attitude towards English among learners in the country. Even though we have so many students who are fluent, so many parents who are accepting of English, we do have students who still think that learning English is somewhat unpatriotic. And it is this group of students that is my main target in the study and future studies with a similar nature. Okay, let's zoom in on some display of negative attitude towards English. So local scholars have reported positive, negative attitude towards English. And today I would like to highlight the public reaction to PPSMI, Pengajaran dan Pembelajaran Sains dan Matematik dalam Bahasa Inggris, which is teaching of science and mathematics in English in 2003. It was a government policy to teach mathematics and science in English, and this is done to reinstate the position of English, which was once used as a medium of instruction in Malaysia in 1970. However, it was the policy was subject to much debate and controversy, up to the point that it led to a coalition of 40 non-governmental and political parties in January 2009. They sought to collect 100,000 signatures, and they marshaled followers to protest against the decision to teach science and mathematics in English. And the main reason, it was cited that the main reason for resistance was the claim that the decision would, of course, uphold English, but it would affect the learning of the national language, which is Bahasa Malaysia. And so the policy was reversed in 2012, and schools were being required to teach English, to teach science and mathematics in Bahasa Malaysia. So Malaysia gained its independence from the British in 1958, but you can see here, across several decades, you see studies from the 1990s up to 2015. There have been reports that some English language learners with negative attitude, they still demonstrated hostility towards English, and mainly due to the belief that English is a threat to national identity and the national language, and that they think that English is a foreign language which with no actual application in their lives, despite its importance, its status and importance worldwide. And some students admitted to feeling disconnected from English because they felt that the way it is taught in class was seemed formal, and emphasis was given on accuracy. Too much emphasis was given on accuracy over practicality, and this has led to the belief that it is something that is difficult to master. And unfortunately, in 2014, Ismail et al., they found that some research respondents at the university level, 2014, still referred to English as the language of colonialists. So in modern classroom, I would like to talk about the gap in DI. In modern classroom, DI has been around since early 2000, and it has been found to demonstrate positive effects on reading fluency and comprehension, general English proficiency, writing skills, learning motivation, language attitude toward the Turkish language, math, special needs classroom, and gifted learner programs. But there has only been limited studies on DI. There were studies on differentiated instruction involving gifted learners in Malaysia. So the demand for differentiated instruction has only surfaced in 2013, and so far we have mostly anecdotal evidence. So there is a need to study this area. And although classroom in the other parts of the world have provided evidence on the effectiveness of DI, language attitude and critical thinking are two variables that have not been explored extensively. Okay. So what's different in this study? I've tried to adapt an instrument by some Thai researchers, Bunrang Sri and et al. And Muhammad Jafri et al. That used an inventory comprising 36 items that covers 3 aspects under language attitude: affective, cognitive, and behavioral. They managed to categorize, instead of using one instrument that is general, they use statements that are categorized into 3 components, 3 aspects: affective, that measures feelings towards English, as well as the likes and dislikes and how the non-native speakers feel towards the native speakers or English language speakers. And we have the cognitive aspects, which comprises statements related to beliefs, thoughts, and viewpoints about English. And the final aspect, the behavioral, which covers statement pertaining to the participants' tendency to adopt a specific learning behavior, what they do, what they actually do to learn English. Yes, this is why I said it's different from previous or existing studies on language attitude in Malaysia, because scholars have found that students, even though they admit to having positive attitude towards the English language, no significant efforts were made at home to be exposed to English. But the thing is, they used an instrument that was general in nature. There were no separate distinction between affective, cognitive, and also behavioral. So this is why the instrument used in the study was important. The one I adapted from Bunrang Sri, the Thai researchers, and also from Muhammad Jafri et al., a team of Malaysian researchers and Libyan researchers. Okay, before I introduce or before I explain the research procedures, let me briefly describe the intervention by specifically referring to the differentiated module. It comprises teachers' lesson plans and student activity sheets for 13 weeks. And the content, it involves topics with exposure to English-speaking community across topics such as national independence, business and retails, and some social issues, especially something on addiction, mental health, and support group. And that is not usually common in Malaysia, but is common in the States, in the United States. So the module was also developed based on yearly teaching calendar that I received from the school, and also the curriculum specifications, something that was provided by the Ministry of Education. And the module was also developed in accordance with the REACH framework. and that was developed by a group of researchers, Rock et al. 2008, and in accordance to Williams' model and Maker's model, and also Bloom's taxonomy on cognitive domain. And two checklists were developed based on the literature, adopting best practices from studies by Bender, Dalman et al., Taylor, Tomlinson, and Tomlinson et al. And these two checklists, they were validated by experts, and they were used by two English teachers in reviewing the differentiated module to ensure that the lessons were indeed were differentiated adequately. Now, this is what I did in the baseline phase. I investigated for differentiation in the teacher's current practice. I recorded some lessons, and I analyzed it to make sure that the teacher did not already he had not already differentiated, because if he had already been differentiating his lessons, this research would take a different form. And during the baseline phase, I also identified the students' language learning style preference so as to design learning activities to differentiate the learning activities according to their learning style preference. And in the intervention planning, I created the differentiated classroom checklist and designed the module, the one that I have briefly explained earlier, and validated and revised the module based on the experts' feedback and also the English teachers' feedback. And during the intervention period of 13 weeks, I first administered the pretest on language attitude inventory, and also the Malaysian critical thinking instrument that was developed by a team of local experts. And I implemented it for 13 weeks, and I did some observation to ensure that the teacher, adhered to the module. And and I did some training for the teachers and for the teacher. And during the first week of intervention, I managed the classroom, and he was there to observe me. And again, in the third week, because he was not feeling confident, and he said he would like for me to demonstrate again in the third week, and I did that. And that was fun. I mean, having to teach students in the secondary school again, that was something to remember. And in the post-intervention phase, I administered the post-test, the language attitude inventory, and also the critical thinking, and analyze the quantitative data before I come up with the semi-structured interview, and interviewed some student volunteers. So these are the results. For language attitude, the student participants scored significantly higher in the post-test, and with a large effect size estimated at 0.89, and it was found out that the effective component in the language attitude test, it was the lowest, meaning that even though the students think highly of English and they understand that it is important, they didn't actually like it. They have very low of attitude towards the subject and also the English-speaking community. And in terms of critical thinking, they scored significantly higher in the post-test than the pre-test, but with a medium effect size at 0.58. And these are the qualitative data, some positive reaction in the classroom, and it led to an increase in learner autonomy. The teacher was cited to have seen some improvement in the frequency of the use of English in the classroom and also outside the classroom, meaning that following the intervention, the students were found to be using English more frequently, even when communicating with the teacher outside the classroom. And they were found to feel positively towards the differentiated task, even though at first, initially, some of the students felt awkward because they're not used to be given options to choose from. I mean, it's usually highly structured in our classroom. You have one task, one specific task to complete, and it's standard for everyone. But this time around, in the using the differentiated module, students have several options to choose from, and they liked it. One of the respondents, one of the student participants, mentioned that it was liberating. They were free to choose, and it was somewhat different. And they also acknowledge, they were cited to acknowledge that it was okay for students to be performing different learning tasks, because during the presentation they learn from each other on new on different tasks. And so yes, so the evidence concurs with the positive findings by Karadag and Yassar that differentiation managed to promote a more positive attitude in learning a language. And I also found out that while students had positive perception, they don't necessarily have high enthusiasm for learning English, and as such, they don't actively carry out strategies to improve proficiency. And this concurred with Siti and Malor, Tang et al. And Parila studies. Even though these previous studies, local studies, they did not exactly report attitudes in terms of the three components. Theirs was a general instrument that report attitude in general. And the change in the critical thinking skills by the display, the increase in the critical thinking by the learners also concurred with some previous studies on critical thinking that propose that critical thinking can actually be taught. So these are the conclusions. We have statistically significant mean score change for language attitude with a large effect size, and statistically significant mean score change for critical thinking, but with a medium effect size. And the affective component of language attitude needs attention, meaning that teachers need to be designing activities that promote the native speakers' culture and daily activities to make sure that the students get to know the native speakers community better. Because all this while in Malaysia, English is used as a tool. Before the new syllabus was introduced, previously it was about using English as a tool to learn about our own culture students don't exactly get to see or learn. They were not exactly exposed to the culture of the native speakers. And critical thinking requires longer intervention because it was only with a medium effect size, apparently 13 weeks. Well, that period was not enough to generate, to estimate a large effect size. And findings from the semi-structured interview corroborated the positive findings from the quantitative data. They gave rise to learner autonomy, and something that is very something that is refreshing to be able to see happen among the second language users in Malaysia. And there was a recognition on differing learning tasks within classroom. So I propose that DI can be carried out at the national level on a large-scale study. Okay. So this ongoing project, this is something that I'm currently doing, even though the intervention was put on hold because of the pandemic, but it will resume very soon. I'm carrying out a similar project involving 200 English learners with 3 English teachers. And this is something that I'm looking forward to for native speakers, or for native speakers of other languages, to be able to become co-developers, co-designers of the differentiated module that will integrate English culture and some local cultures, and also other cultures, in hope that these students will become worldly, will become more accepting of foreign cultures, and they would be accommodating of other people, because the aim is not to have our students feel strongly negatively towards a particular culture, and to make sure that they know that you can improve, you can learn an additional language without losing, without forgetting your roots. And yeah, and also, if you're interested, I'd be very honored to have some of you to become the reviewers of the module, especially in terms of the English culture and also the other cultures. And that is all the time I have left. Thank you very much for your attention, and this would be my email address in case you need to be in touch. But of course, I'll be sharing this the slides with the organizer after this. Thank you.